For a long time now, I've been wanting to shoot an episode where I distill over 20 years of my life experience trying to figure out life. I've been at it for about 20 years, like really trying to figure out life, distill all of that down into the most powerful, the most potent advice, tips, and wisdom that you need if you were like a newborn, if you were just dropped on this planet. Let's say you weren't a baby, you were dropped on this planet as an adult. Let's just imagine, hypothetically. And you needed to figure out like what to do in life, how to live. Forget all the kid stuff, forget all the toys and all that. How do you actually live life? What is life about? What do you really need to know to ace life? So let's talk about that. Oh man, the problem with shooting such an episode and giving such advice is that there's just so much. I almost imagine like shooting it as though like to my future son. Let's say I pass away, whatever, and then my son at one point just like sits down and watches one video. Like, what do I gotta tell you in the next hour or two to make the most difference in your life? So let's look at it like that. And yeah, the trick with it is where do we begin? There's so much. There's so much. Perhaps the first thing you should know about life is that life needs to be lived to be understood. We're born almost like blank slates, knowing nothing. We're born completely ignorant. And then we get bombarded by life. Life is not a theoretical pursuit. Life is here. It's embodied. You're in it. You're feeling it. There's pain. There's suffering. There's intense pleasure and joy and everything in between. It's the full range, and there's so much going on, and it's so enormous. It's so enormous that most people, it takes them a long time, if ever, that they realize the enormity of what life is. And I'm not even going into some deep metaphysical topics yet. I'm just talking about ordinary human life. It's enormous. There's so much to do in life, so much to learn, so much to explore. So many mistakes to make, so many traps to fall into. And perhaps that's where we should start, is with the notion of traps. There are many, many, many traps that you will be falling into in life if you're not careful. And really the point of this conversation right now is that I want to point out to you the most serious traps, the most common traps that people fall into. And there's hundreds, there's thousands of these traps, so I won't be able to enumerate them all for you. But I will point out the most important ones, the deepest ones. This is the kind of stuff that they're not going to teach you in school. So we'll be explaining many, many traps over the next hour or two as I'm talking. So just keep that notion of traps in the back of your mind. Already, just having that one idea of, oh, life is filled with traps, I got to be careful. That already is a really powerful concept to keep in the back of your mind as you're going through life in various situations. Now, that's not to make you paranoid and to make you afraid of every situation. That itself would be a trap. Fear is one of the biggest traps, but we'll get to that. So I'm not saying it to make you paranoid. I'm just saying there are many traps. There are many ways to screw up life, but also life has enormous potential. So one of the things you should know is that life can get really, really bad, much worse than you could ever imagine. And life can get really, really good, much better than you can ever imagine. So the spectrum, because life is so enormous, the spectrum is really, really wide. And it's not a one-dimensional spectrum or even a two-dimensional spectrum. It's multi-dimensional. And that's also something you should know about life, is that life is multi-dimensional. There are so many dimensions to it. That's what makes it complex. Life is enormously complex. There's no simple 5-minute advice that I could give you There's no simple one book that can be read that will teach you all the stuff you got to know. It's massive. It's sprawling. There's so many variables. And one of the biggest variables depends upon who you are. So see, to live a good life, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to both learn and figure out how life works, but also learn and figure out how you work and how you fit into life. And nobody can tell you that because you're uniquely you. You're different from other people. You're different from me. Now, I can give you general guidelines, general wisdom, general advice, of course. There's much we have in common. But in the end, you got to customize life to you to make it really work for you. I don't know all of your ins and outs. Sometimes I make assumptions about how you're similar to me. You might be different than me in important ways. And so the first rule is you got to really be true to yourself. Be willing to honor your uniqueness and to figure out life for yourself. You see, you got to wonder at some point, why am I alive? Why am I here at all? Am I just here to repeat somebody else's life? Am I just here to live the same life that my parents lived, that my teachers lived, that my church leader lived, that my ancestors lived? Or am I here to do something new? And what I'm suggesting to you is that you're here to do something new. Reality and the universe is a deeply intelligent thing. Don't take it for something stupid. It doesn't just repeat itself over and over and over again, generation after generation after generation. What you see, if you observe society from a big picture perspective, is you see society evolving. Every generation is different and new, and figuring out new challenges in life, discovering new opportunities, new potentials that can be actualized, and so on. Life never stands still. And so now you're here. And one of the biggest things you should be asking yourself now is, why am I here? What am I here to do? And don't look for that answer to come from somebody else, like your parents or your teachers or your church leaders, to tell you why you're here and what you need to do, but turn inwards. And that's one of the biggest secrets of life, is spend more time reflecting and turning inwards and really asking yourself deep questions about life, rather than reading them or trying to get them from other people. Which brings us to perhaps the biggest trap of all in life, and that is the trap of ideology, and the trap of falling into belief systems that other people have invented. See, because you're born like a blank slate, your mind is pure, it's clean when you're first here. But then very quickly, as you see, in order to survive in life, and that's what life is, it's a process of survival. We'll talk more about that in a minute. That's very important. But in order for you to survive, you need to quickly learn lessons. Quickly pick up lesson after lesson after lesson. When you're young, you're forced to do this. And of course, your mind is so open. It's such an open slate that almost anything can be written on it. It's almost like a blank piece of paper or a blank canvas. But you're born into a society, and human beings, as you've probably already noticed, are a very social species. Everything we do in a society. You're not an individual, you're part of a larger superorganism. Your city, your country, your culture, the world, the human species, your family unit, your religious group, the scientific community, if you're part of that, whatever. The language you use, all of these are social institutions and tools and inventions. And so the challenge is that the individual and the collective are so intertwined, if you're a human, that it's both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in the sense that society allows you so many cool things, technology and various comforts of living that you get, entertainment and interesting cultural stuff, cultural artifacts, art and reading. You can tap into the collective wisdom of hundreds of generations of humans that came before you. So you don't have to figure life all out from scratch by yourself. Yet, on the other hand, if what you do is you just blindly let yourself be programmed by your culture, by society, by your religious group, or even by the scientific community, then your mind is going to get filled with belief systems and ideologies. And these will seriously rob you of your happiness and your potential to use your mind to really ace life. And so trap number one is falling into ideologies and belief systems and taking those as dogma, and then defending those and fighting over those and debating those and getting involved in this ideological game, whether it's with religion, with science, with atheism, with politics, with economics, with gender identity, with philosophy, with cosmology, with spirituality, with various kinds of new age belief systems. Whatever it is, the number one trap is getting your mind locked into one of these belief systems, because these belief systems are like the operating system upon which the rest of your life will hinge. The operating system then dictates what kind of software can run in that environment, what kind of apps you can install and load, and how they work. See? So the real work here is making sure that you're not working at the surface level of changing the apps, rearranging the apps on your computer, but that you're working at a deeper level of looking at the internal workings of the operating system and making sure that you're not limited or straitjacketed by some operating system, some ideology, some paradigm, some belief system. And then even going deeper, we're going to get even deeper. We're going to get to the kernel level, where you even pick apart the heart, the kernel of the operating system, and you get to the very root, to the nugget of the whole thing, how it all works, and that will take us into metaphysics and spirituality. But let's not get ahead of ourselves yet. So the quality of your life is going to directly hinge on the quality of your mind and how you use your mind. See, this is one of the things that separates humans the most from animals, is that animals live a very physical, embodied existence, whereas us humans, the most important things we do is how we use our minds. This is both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. We can get trapped in our minds and completely lost to the point where we become suicidal in the worst case scenario, or even start going insane, mentally unstable. Or we can develop a sharp, clear mind and learn to use it effectively to learn lessons about life and to master life and to construct the kind of life that we want. And it all depends on how you use your mind. See, for animals, it's not so important. But for humans, it's very important. And we're living in a society where, in our society, the people who earn the most money and are the most successful in our society, they are not manual laborers. They are not construction workers. They are the deep thinkers. They are the strategists. They are the political leaders. They are the visionaries, the inventors, the creators. This is all coming from the mind. See? So whatever you do in your life, master your mind. And most of the traps that I was talking about are going to be traps of your own mind. See, your greatest enemy is not out there somewhere. It's not somebody else. It's yourself. And that's one of the biggest lessons that you need to understand really early to learn in life, is that there's nobody out there to blame for what's happening in your life. If you want to ace life, you need to take responsibility and ownership for your own mind and how you're using your mind, and to start to notice that by introspecting, you can see how your own mind is contributing to the kind of results that you're getting in your life. And so if there's something in your life that you're not happy with, you're not getting the kind of emotions you want, the kind of love you want, the kind of material success you want, rather than blaming somebody or creating a story, an ideology about how you're being victimized or how life is unfair and so forth, always, especially when it's difficult, especially when you want to blame somebody else, especially when you feel victimized, especially when you feel like you've been wronged, turn even deeper within and ask yourself, how can I take ownership over this situation? And how is my mind playing a part in these results that I'm getting? That's going to be your ticket out. See, you can either be blaming others, or you can take ownership and then look for a way to change the situation. And I recommend you take that second option. Now, the trick is that the mind oftentimes doesn't want to look inwards. It likes to project outwards. And another trick is that reality is such a weird and twisted thing that it seems as though we're in a physical, material, tangible world here, where there are tangible facts. You can knock on a wall, it's made out of solid concrete or whatever, and that's just a fact. You can't do anything about it, and there are many such facts in the world, and we have to kind of deal with this, and that the world, it seems like the world is accosting you from the outside. Stuff is happening to you, and then you're just sort of forced to juggle the balls as best as you can. This is, in fact, an illusion. And one of the most important things you got to understand about life is that your mind is projecting and creating reality. It is not simply that there is a reality and you were born into it. No, your mind is interwoven with physical reality itself in such a way that your thoughts and emotions and your belief system and your ideology and all of this, it's all creating the kind of reality that you see out there. There's many layers to it, okay? So right now, you may not understand how you're creating a wall, or how you're creating a house or a tree, these physical objects. And for most people, they have no idea how they're creating it, and they never will, because they're at a level of consciousness where they can't access that. But there actually are levels of consciousness where you can start to become conscious of how you're even manifesting physical objects, let alone various problems in your life and so forth. Now, of course, now we're getting into some complex territory, getting ahead of ourselves here, but just understand that your mind is interwoven with physical reality itself. You don't know exactly how that works yet. It's a complex process. It's not so simple. It doesn't just simplistically mean that, oh, well, I can just think $1 million and here it is. It's not that simple. It's a lot more complicated than that. But your mind is intertwined with physical reality. And so the world you see is not just a world that existed before you and that now you're inside of it, but rather your mind is playing an active, creative role, not just in how your personal life unfolds, but if we're getting to that sort of kernel of the operating system, if we want to go really deep, your mind is generating reality. But this, of course, requires a much more nuanced and complex notion of mind than most people in your culture and in your society would have you believe. So you see, here's the real trick with understanding life, is that if you're going to try to understand life by simply subscribing to various kinds of belief systems that others give you, you will never fully understand how life works. And you will forever be at the effect of it, its victim. And you will get stuck in various kinds of belief systems and ideologies. And you will be incapable of really grasping what life is. So one of my pieces of advice for you is that you start to take the process of learning and understanding extremely seriously. Your job here in life is not to screw around and to have fun and to watch TV and play video games and eat good food and all that sort of stuff. You can do all those things. I'm not denying any of those to you. You can enjoy all the pleasures of life. So what I teach, my philosophy, is not some hardcore ascetic philosophy where you deny yourself all the pleasures. No, not at all. Enjoy the pleasures, but realize that those are all desserts. Those are all secondary, tertiary, and even further down the list sort of things. Your first priority should be understanding and learning. If you can nail understanding and learning, that's going to be the master key that unlocks everything else for you, every other domain in life. That's what you'll discover. And if you don't get a handle on learning and understanding, then how will you ever understand what life is? How will you ever understand all of its subcomponents and subdomains? You won't, and by not understanding it, you're going to act like a fool, thinking you understand something that you don't really understand, oversimplifying things, and then getting yourself into trouble. See, you think you understand how you're going to generate happiness in your life, so you go do some heroin or some drugs, and then you discover, oh, that you get trapped in that, and then through a painful process, you discover that your understanding of how happiness works was completely backwards, which is why you went for the drugs and then you had to make a painful return out of them to find true happiness, you see. But why did that whole process happen? It's because you didn't have enough depth of understanding of what happiness is and how to get it. This is just but one example. This understanding or this learning, this will be something that you'll be doing for the rest of your life. And it's important you start as soon as possible to start understanding reality at deeper and deeper levels as soon as possible. Try to independently for yourself understand everything you come into contact with. Are you inside of a house? Try to understand what a house is. How is it built? Where did it come from? Are you walking down the street and walking through a park? Try to understand what a park is, where trees come from, how they grow, what they do, what their function on the planet is. Are you in a relationship with some friend? Try to understand what a relationship is. Wonder about that. Try to understand the dynamics of relationships. Are all relationships the same, or are they different? Is there a difference between man-man relationships versus man-woman relationships? Sexual relationships versus platonic relationships? See, friendships versus boss-worker or boss-employee relationships? What kind of common factors are there between different relationships? And through this process, everything that you're interacting with life, try to recognize that if you're new here, it's all foreign to you. You're learning it for the first time. You have no idea what anything is. And one of the greatest mistakes you can make is just to take other people's words for what things are. You need to cultivate an attitude of independence of mind where you are independently, curiously thinking through what things are for yourself. Of course, you can read books and you can watch videos and you can take advice from others like myself, but ultimately, you're going to have to run all that through your own independent intellect. Even this advice that I'm giving you right now, how do you know it's true? How do you know it's good? How do you know I'm not leading you into a trap? How do you know I don't have some ulterior motive? You don't know. So what do you do in this case? Do you turn off the recording and then not listen to some good advice? No. You have to think through it and work through it yourself. That's why you're here. That's why you were born, is to figure all this stuff out. There's a bunch of different puzzles here, and you're figuring them out every single day, every single year of your life. You're being faced with new challenges, new puzzles, and you got to be figuring it out. Whereas most people, most of your friends and colleagues and family members, they're going to be lazy. They're not going to want to go through the intellectual work of trying to understand things at a deep level. They're going to be satisfied with surface level understanding of things. And that's how they get trapped. So how do you go about understanding? Well, questioning. Questioning is perhaps the number one key there. Start questioning everything. Leave nothing unquestioned. Leave no stone unturned. Question religion, question science, question philosophy, question school, question your elders, question your teachers, your parents, your coworkers, your friends, those beneath you, those over you. Question politicians, question those in power, question the military, question the medical system, question society, and question yourself. Questioning seems very simple, but it will get you very far. Questioning is what activates your mind to work independently. So ask higher quality questions and constantly be contemplating what life is and how it works. There will be a lot of people who will want to tell you all the answers. Unfortunately, life can't work that way. You have to discover the answers. It's not a matter of getting the answer. The point of questioning is not per se to get the answer, it's to go through the process of the questioning and the thinking through it. If I just give you some answer, but you haven't gone through the process of deriving it yourself, you're not going to get the value from it. It's just going to go in one ear and out the other. Sometimes to get an answer to a deep question about life might take you 5, 10, 20 years of work, questioning, contemplating, of curiosity, of passion. Speaking of which, I should, point out a couple of other key pillars that are very important for life. Curiosity. Develop a curiosity about everything. Be curious. Look at how amazing this thing called reality is. Don't just take it for granted and don't just assume that you understand what it is. You don't. Act as though you are the first human who was ever born and that you're discovering all of life for the first time. Because in a sense, that is how it feels from your point of view. So be curious about everything. This is what will drive you to buy books, to watch videos, to listen to recordings, to take courses, to constantly be learning. Don't let learning be some dry, stale process that only happens in school or during homework time. Learning is something you got to be passionate about. This is why you're here. This is why you're alive, is to be learning. Whatever they're teaching you in school, that's a mockery of the learning process. Sure, it's still necessary and it's still good. There's going to be a lot of important stuff you'll learn at school, and I recommend you take school seriously. You don't slack off and play games there too much. But what really matters is that you become your own lifelong learner and educator. Be passionate about teaching yourself about how life works through questioning, through independently going out there and reading books, not just the books that your teachers assign you, but the books that you're interested in. Study the subjects you're interested in. Which brings us to the other pillar, which is passion. What is the point of living life if you're not going to be passionate about it? Yet, as obvious as that sounds, when you look around you, and the older you get, the more you're going to see this, you're going to see more and more of your coworkers and friends and family members living listless, passionless lives where the passion has been robbed of them. They've been robbed of their passion, and somewhere along the way they lost their passion for life, or maybe they never even developed it. These people take life for granted, and that really is the worst thing you can do with life, is to take it for granted. You're here, something amazing is going on, it's a mystery, you don't really know what it is. Now start learning, start discovering, start being curious, and start being passionate. And of course, that leads us to the next huge chunk of life advice, which is have something in your life that you're deeply passionate about. Multiple things. In fact, you should be so passionate about life that it's hard for you to choose which handful of things to be passionate about, because your passion is endless and sprawling. But nevertheless, you're going to have to hone your passion down to find a few things that you want to devote your life to. And the sooner you can find this in your life, the better. This is going to be the foundation of your life. And basically all of the advice I'm giving here is going to be the foundation of your life. But really, without passion, you're not going to be motivated. You're not going to be motivated to get up in the morning and to do the work that needs to be done. You're going to be lazy. You're just going to go through the motions of living life. You're going to turn into a zombie. So start pursuing the stuff that makes you passionate. And passion is like a snowball. It starts very slow, starts rolling down the hill, and it builds and builds and builds and builds and grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. So it's important that you find something that you're going to devote a significant chunk of your time to, a significant chunk of your life to, that you're both passionate about, that you have maybe some skill or some talent in, and that you're interested in working on. Because, hey, you're here and life is a function of survival. Everyone in life, no matter what they're doing, they're surviving. They're surviving in different, unique ways. So you're going to have to be surviving too. Doesn't matter who you are, you're going to have some kind of job, and you're going to have to do some kind of work. I recommend you find a job and work on your terms rather than on somebody else's terms. Create a career for yourself, not just a job, a career for yourself, and even beyond a career, but a life purpose for yourself. Something that's going to be the fuel for the rest of your life that explains why you're going to work and somehow ties in with your deepest passions about life. It could be music, it could be film, it could be video games, it could be writing, it could be art, it could be politics, it could be science, it could be medicine, it could be a million things. It makes no difference what it is as long as it suits you. And that's coming back to the very first point that I made, is that you got to customize life for you. Nobody can tell you whether you should be a lawyer or a doctor or a scientist or an engineer or a programmer or an artist or a movie director. Only you can know that. Pick the thing that you're really, really passionate about. And to find those things, you got to go and explore life a little bit. If you're sitting there and you're saying, well, I got nothing I'm passionate about, that's because, first of all, you're taking life for granted. There's a ton of things to be passionate about, but you're so taking life for granted. So stop doing that. Get really curious. Go start exploring life. See all the potential that's out there. And then as you're doing that, stuff will resonate with you. Stuff will move you. It'll make you emotional. Maybe you watch a movie, it makes you emotional. Good. Go down that road. You're getting some kind of emotional response there. Some kind of passion is coming up. Maybe you play a video game, that stirs up some passion. Maybe you watch some science documentary, that stirs up some passion in you. Maybe you see somebody being a doctor and that stirs up some passion in you. Whatever that is. Start exploring those things and start following your passions. Without that, you're going to have a long, miserable life, because you're going to be working roughly from the age of 20 to the age of 65 at least. If you don't work on your terms, society will force you to work. There's no escaping work. You're going to have to work in life. Not only are you going to have to work, you're probably going to have to work 40 hours a week. for a good 45 years, at least, maybe more. That's going to be a giant chunk of your time. We're talking about a third of your life, a third of your waking hours, maybe even half or more of your waking hours will be devoted to work. So it just makes sense that you want to have a lot of passion in your work. You want to feel like your work is meaningful. And meaning is not something that's found out there. Meaning is something you create. Again, remember, like I said, your mind and reality are intertwined. So passion is not just something that comes to you from outside. Passion is something you can generate. You can learn to generate it. It's about how your mind interacts with reality. If your mind is listless and lazy and you expect just passion to hit you from outside, well, you might never find it that way. But if you're proactive and you're going out there looking for it with curiosity and questioning, that is going to help attract the passion to you. You're going to actually create it. You're going to generate it. See? Desire and ambition are very important aspects of living a good life. Now, of course, sometimes people demonize desire as a bad thing, but there's many different levels and qualities of desire. There's low-quality desires, like the desire for heroin, and there's very high-quality desires, like the desire to be selfless. So it's really a question of purifying the quality of your desire. And the magical thing about reality, and here's one secret that you can use to really create any kind of life you want, is that desire is far more important than knowing how to do something. So maybe you desire to be a doctor, but you have no idea how to be a doctor. It might seem like that's a big problem. And it might seem that, well, yeah, I have my desire, but the desire, what is desire? It's just some subjective emotional feeling, some emotions, some fluffy stuff. It's not tangible. You can't really bank on it. It's not physical or concrete. And then, you know, being a doctor, that's like real skill, and that's like you have a job and somebody pays you good money for that, and like that's a tangible thing. But all the tangible things in life, whether it's money, houses, sexual partners, marriages, children, you know, all the tangible stuff in life that you might want, really it all begins with desire. Desire is how you get it. And if you think about it, when you enter life, you have no idea how life works. But you learn along the way. How do you learn? Through a desire to get a thing accomplished. How did you learn how to walk? You had a desire to go across the room, maybe to grab some candy or whatever, or just to peek out the window. And then, how did you learn to move your legs? Did someone teach you? Did someone tell you? Did you read an instruction manual? Did it matter that you didn't know how to move your legs? Did you sit there and you say to yourself, oh man, I'm so depressed because I don't know how to move my legs? No. It's that desire that pushed you, that ambition. You had ambition that pushed you to want to start walking and then running and then jumping and doing all the other stuff. And that's going to just keep going and expanding further in your life as long as you stoke up that ambition and that desire and you make sure it's a high quality one. That's what you're using as your engine to drive your life. If you don't have passion and ambition and desire in your life, you have no engine. You have no motivation to do anything. You're just going to go with the flow. And you're just going to get the default, the status quo. And the status quo is just what everybody else has around you. And it's not going to be very exciting. It's not going to be very interesting. It's going to be rather miserable. You're going to be going to a boring job, doing boring work for some boring person, contributing perhaps even in harmful and evil ways to the world. So one of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself, remember going back to that piece of advice about being really good about questioning and also the advice about introspecting, ask yourself the question constantly, what do I want? What do I desire out of life? What am I passionate about? How can I be more passionate about life? Because really, it's quite simple. Do you want a passionate life or not? Those are your two only choices. You're either going to get one or the other. And if you're not proactively pursuing a passionate life, you're going to, by default, get a passionless life. It's pretty simple. This isn't rocket science. For me, my passion and ambition and desire stems from a deep metaphysical sense that life is something precious, that my life is important. Not in any kind of egotistical sense that I think that, oh, I'm some important person. Not in that sense. I fully recognize that life is an illusion and that all meaning is self-generated, and I've recognized this since I was a child. All right, so if you think that life has some ultimate meaning grounded in some one thing, it doesn't. Life's meaning is whatever you create it to be. You are the creator of your life's meaning. So if you believe that life has no meaning, that's what you'll create and that's what you'll get, and then you'll probably be depressed and nihilistic, and you probably won't have much fun. If you believe that life is very meaningful, if you believe it's very meaningful to save other people's lives by working in an emergency room as a doctor, then that's what you'll create. That will be your life. And if you believe it's meaningful to sit on a computer all day and post away on the internet, then that's what you'll do. You'll find that meaningful, and that will be your life. And if you believe it's meaningful to read books, then that's the kind of life you'll create for yourself. See? Now, is it really meaningful? This is a silly question. There's no such thing as really meaningful. Meaningful is whatever you say it is. And of course, what others around you say it is too. So of course, your culture and your society plays a big role as well. And of course, there's things that your body requires. There's survival demands for humans. And so of course, that appears meaningful to us. But this leads us into the next point, which is now we're starting to get a little bit more metaphysical, is that reality is subjective. It's a subjective thing. It's not like a physical object found somewhere in the universe. That's not reality. Reality is a subjective thing. You're living through it. Don't let the scientists and materialists convince you otherwise. Be in touch with your feelings. Be in touch with how reality feels. Don't just think about reality. It might seem like I'm telling you to question and to introspect a lot, which puts you a lot into your kind of cerebral mind. And that's important. But no, your mind includes not just thinking, it includes feeling. And in fact, getting in touch with your feelings and your intuitions is far more important than just thinking. And this is one of those aspects that mainstream society and school won't teach you, is how to feel deeper. Really spend a lot of time feeling. Feel physical objects. Feel emotions. Feel the difference between anger and sadness and frustration and depression and sexual arousal and different kinds of sexual arousals. Start to draw fine distinctions and degrees, recognize fine degrees between these different things and many, many more. Feel everything. Even just when you walk into a room, into a building, how does it feel to you? What is your intuition telling you? Connect with your intuition. That intuition, it seems sometimes like it's a fluffy, airy-fairy thing. Society will tell you that intuition is, you can't bank on it. It's not scientific enough. It's not reasonable. It's not logical. But intuition will get you a lot further in life than just cold reason and logic will. Your heart is where your passion comes from. It's where your love for life comes from. And love is still an important topic we have yet to scratch the surface of. But like I was saying, I would have been on tangent. My passion for life comes from a sort of a deep metaphysical sense, and really is a spiritual sense, that something incredible is going on with reality. And by which I mean reality itself is an incredible thing. And if you just tune in for a second that you exist, just tune into the fact that you were born, at least you think you were born, conventionally speaking, you exist, here you are, you're a part of reality, you're participating in the subjective experience of reality. Just like turn inwards for a moment, put your awareness on that and just kind of go, whoa, how did I even get here? It's a miracle that I was even born. So by connecting with that sense, then the next step for me in my thinking process is I say, well, wow, it's incredible with this reality that I'm here. It's incredible. I'm not quite sure what it is. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Look at how beautiful everything is. It seems to work in an intelligible way. It's not just a hodgepodge of random crap that's happening. There's a sort of consistency and an order to it. Reality is highly ordered. This order can be studied and understood, which is why we're talking at all here. So there seems to be a sort of logic to reality, but at the same time, we're not really sure, like, where is reality going? Where is life going? What's the point of it? So these are very high quality, open questions. You can keep questioning these for years, and you'll go down the right path as you keep questioning all this. Yeah, just recognize how amazing it is to be alive. It's a rare gift to be alive. It's a rare gift. And you got to wonder in the back of your mind, like, why was I the lucky one? Why was I chosen to be here? Because you can imagine that you might have not been born at all. You were that lucky egg and that lucky sperm that met, combined together, and then here's you from that process. At least that's what science tells us. So let's just go with that for now. But still, you know, there's your mom has hundreds and maybe thousands of eggs. Your dad has millions and billions of sperm. What are the odds that they meet and then you come out of it? And here you are. Especially if you have decent health, if your body's not disfigured and deformed, I mean, then hey, look how lucky you are. If you live in a relatively decent country, not in some war zone, look how lucky you are. If you don't have some terrible disease or cancer, look how lucky you are. If you come from a decent family where you weren't terribly abused physically and emotionally, look how lucky you are. But even if you have some of those things, and some of those are holding you back, and I know that some of you do, and some of you, suffer from those things, that's okay too. It's just you're gonna have a little harder time, and that's fine. One of the biggest lessons you're gonna have to learn about life is that you have to deal with the hand that you've been dealt, like in poker, right? You don't get to choose which cards you're dealt. Sometimes you're dealt some crummy cards, and part of the challenge of life is rolling with those punches and figuring it out anyways. So make a commitment to always be figuring it out. And sometimes life will get really challenging and you'll be thrown a curveball, but you gotta commit to really living a good life. Which I guess ties it all together here. Once you recognize that your life is precious, that it's this amazing, miraculous thing, then you ask yourself, okay, so I've been given this miracle of life, whereas others don't have it. I've been given the miracle of relatively decent health that maybe others don't have. I've got time ahead of me. I've got 30, 40, 50 years, whatever, left of my life. 80 years, maybe some of you. what's worthwhile to do? If life is a miracle, if life is amazing, and I've been blessed with it, what is my obligation? My obligation is to make the most of my life. So your question is, how do I live a good life? That should be one of the top questions on your list of questions to ask. And this is not a question you ask once or twice. This is a question you ask for the next 40 years of your life. How do I live a good life? What do I desire? What is worthwhile doing? What is meaningful to me? What do I want out of life? Not what my parents want from me, or what my teachers tell me, or what my culture wants from me, but what do I want? And to know what you want, this gets back to that point about feeling. You see, you can't just logically think through what my passion should be. It's like, well, should I be a doctor or a lawyer? Let me logically weigh the two. Let me see, how much does a lawyer earn? How much does the doctor earn? Oh, the lawyer earns more. And how many hours does the doctor work? Oh, the doctor works a lot. Okay, so we just tally all that up and then we say, okay, lawyer is the best one. It's like, no, you got to feel it. You see, you got to intuit it. You got to be connected with your heart, not just with your logical left hemisphere. You can't just be analyzing life all the time. You got to deeply connect with what moves you, because what moves you in the end is not logic. It's emotion. And here, I'll point out a really common trap that many people fall into these days in the 21st century in the developed world is we're hyper-logical. Science has been very successful in the last couple hundred years, has produced a lot of technology. And there's a lot we could say about science, but science has some dangers with it. One of the dangers of science is that it overanalyzes everything. It looks upon reality as a physical, material object to be dissected and deconstructed in an objective manner, detached from it, dissociated from it. See, the scientist, ideally, in the scientist's mind, the scientist thinks that the best way to understand reality is to be separate from reality. The scientist almost wants to extract himself out of the universe and then look down upon the universe and as though like through a microscope and study it at a distance, not himself being involved with the subject that he's studying at all. And this works in certain narrow situations. You know, if you want to study some bacteria in a petri dish, you can do it that way, safely at a distance. But life itself, notice, life is not safely at a distance. Life is the exact opposite of that. It's completely you and your body and your mind enmeshed with physical reality such that the two can't be even separated from each other. The object and the subject are one. You are here and you are connected right, you're plugged right into life. You're plugged right into reality. So when I cut you with a knife, you feel it. You can't act like a scientist some distance removed, where you might take a knife and cut off your arm and then take your arm and then study it under a microscope and then maybe eat it for dinner. That's what life would be like if the scientists were right, if life was purely logical and analytical, but it's not. And the trap is trying to treat reality as though logic is the ultimate lens through which to understand reality. It's not. Logic is highly, highly limited. And in fact, logic is easily abused and misused to justify any kind of ideology or belief system, like I talked about before. Logic becomes its own trap. Now, of course, emotions can also become huge traps. So there's no easy answers here. And that's another lesson about life, is that life is highly complex. There are no simple answers usually. It's a delicate balancing act. There's no one clear right path or one clear answer about what you should do or how you should behave or what you should be passionate about or what's right and what's wrong or what's good and what's evil. There are no clear answers to these things. That's what makes life so interesting. If it was just black and white and simple, what would be the point of living it? You see? So don't want it to be simple and black and white. Learn to love the complexity. The complexity gives you grist for the mill of your mind you have something to learn, something to study, something to figure out. You have a bunch of puzzles to solve in life. See, that makes life interesting. Emotions are more powerful than logic. Even the most logical people in the world who will try to tell you that their philosophy and attitude towards life is all logical, in reality, their life is run 95% by emotions, 5% by logic. Emotions are what move people. Emotions are more fundamental than logic and than thinking. Emotions drive your sexual behavior. Emotions drive what you eat, what you don't eat, what you like, what you don't like, who you're willing to sleep with, who you're not willing to sleep with, what you're scared of, what you're not scared of, when you're pissed off at somebody. And emotions save your life. When you're walking through the forest and a bear jumps out at you, you get scared and you run away. Saves your life. That's why emotions are more powerful than logic. Because with logic, you'd just be standing there thinking about like, oh, that's a bear. Let me analyze this bear. Oh, is it a brown bear or is it a black bear? Is it a fast bear or is it a slow bear? Is he going to attack me? No. You just feel fear and you run. And that saves your life. If you were analyzing for 5 minutes there, the bear would eat you. See? So get out of your head and more into your body. Feel yourself. If you don't feel good in your body, if you don't feel good about your life, no amount of logic and no amount of external conditions will do it for you. Because in the end, what do you want? You want to be satisfied and you want to be happy and you want to be passionate. That's what you really want out of life. That's what constitutes a good life. Now, of course, the details of that will vary person to person, but that's generally what every person wants. But notice those are emotional things. Satisfaction, happiness, peace of mind. These are emotional things. They're not logical things. See? So if you can't feel good in your body, you can't ever be happy. And if you try to approach life from this dissociated place where you are like back here, then there's a glass wall over here, and then there's life over there, and you're trying to live it at a distance, this is also, people who do that, they really do that because they're afraid of feeling life. And of course, that's totally understandable because sometimes life can feel shitty. There can be a lot of deep suffering and pain. But here's one of my pieces of advice for you. When you're suffering, and you will be suffering a lot, that's guaranteed. You will be suffering a lot. When you're suffering, when you're feeling bad, lonely, sad, depressed, angry, jealous, and any other negative emotion, rather than numbing yourself or distracting yourself, have the courage to feel into that more deeply. A common trap that people fall into in life without even recognizing it is that they think that, well, I want the positive emotions, but I don't want the negative ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to feel the positive ones and then suppress, deny, ignore, and numb out the negative ones. Huge mistake. Huge mistake. Actually, what you need to do counterintuitively is you need to feel deeper into the negative emotions. That will allow you then to become good at feeling in general. That will allow you to then feel deeper into the positive emotions as well. Suppression and denial and ignoring things, this is not the attitude you want to take towards life. This is the wrong approach. Stuff that you deny or suppress or sweep under the rug in life, it will always come back to haunt you. It'll turn into a festering wound, so be careful about that. Try to face problems and difficulties head on rather than trying to avoid them. This avoidance behavior is really problematic. It leads to a lot of neurosis and psychological dysfunction. And that's what will happen if you live life improperly. If you try to bullshit yourself, if you try to lie to yourself, if you try to deny things, if you try to play manipulative games, this will create a neurotic, toxic psychology in you. You're not going to get away with it. You see, there's a cost to these things. There's a cost to lying, manipulating, stealing, cheating. You're never going to get away with these things. And one of the worst things you can do is lying to yourself. So I recommend, as one of the core pillars of your foundation for life, is that you make a commitment towards maximum radical self-honesty. You can bullshit others to a degree and get away with it, but at least make the commitment to always be honest with yourself. Always be truthful with yourself. Because if you're not truthful with yourself, what's going to happen is you're going to bullshit yourself. You're going to deceive yourself. And that's going to take you in the wrong direction in life. Consider, if you don't know the truth about a situation and you have some false story about it, then what do you got? Do you have what it really is? Do you have the substance of the thing? Do you have the reality of it? Or do you have nothing? You see, when you think about that and you realize that if you don't have the truth about a situation, what you have is literally have nothing. Because reality is what's true. That's why truth is so powerful and truth is so important. And that's another piece of advice I have for you is take truth really seriously. Truth and honesty, these are not merely things that you do for the benefit of others so that others don't get mad at you. So it's not that you tell your mother the truth because if you didn't, then she will ground you or something like that. No. This is totally inadequate of an understanding of why truth is important. Truth is important because truth is what everything is and the only thing that there is. Truth is reality. Reality is all of the stuff that you see around you. So if something isn't true, it isn't real. And if it isn't real, it isn't here. And if it isn't here, it's not in your experience. And if it's not in your experience, then it's nothing to you. It doesn't exist. Literally so. So ask yourself this. For the rest of your life, do you want to be on the side of truth? Or do you want to be on the side of playing games and bullshitting and deceiving yourself and deceiving others and lying to yourself and lying to others? Which do you want to be on? Do you think you can create a life, a good life, based on deception, manipulation, falsehood, denial, suppression? No, it ain't gonna work. So I recommend you make a serious lifelong commitment to really be committed to truth at all costs, even when it's painful. And that's the trick with truth, is that to really make a serious commitment to truth, it's like marriage. It's like it's a commitment more serious than marriage, really. Because what it means is that I'm not going to be with you just in the good times. I'm going to be especially with you in the bad times. That's what you're committing to. So with the truth, of course, it's easy to love the truth when the truth serves you and the truth is on your side. But you will discover, and everybody does, that at some point the truth will be against you. The truth will not be in your survival interest. The truth will cost you money. The truth may cost you a friendship or a relationship. The truth may hurt. It may hurt you. It may hurt somebody else. Might hurt their feelings. Might hurt their pocketbook. It might lead to the collapse of a business. It might lead you to losing a job, being truthful and honest. And in those moments, you're going to be tempted to lie, to manipulate, to deceive, to not be fully truthful with others, but even more importantly with yourself, because you can't lie effectively to others without lying to yourself. If you think that, oh, well, I'll just lie to my mom, and I'll lie to my dad, and I'll lie to my boss, but with myself, I'll be honest. Who are you kidding? See, now you're already lying to yourself. You won't be able to maintain your lies to others without lying to yourself. And there's so many things that you lie to yourself about. There's so many deep levels to it. See? So, a couple of other quick pillars that I'll give you here for your foundation is, one pillar is that life is deeply counterintuitive. That's exactly how people fall into traps, is that they think that, oh, this will work one way, and it turns out that it works exactly the opposite. You think that, oh, well, that heroin produces a nice pleasure or high for me, and I can just keep doing that every day, and that's going to lead to happiness. And then you find out, no, it's actually exactly the opposite. Or you think that, oh, logic, I can just use logic to analyze all of reality, and then I'll live a good life. Because emotions are bad and emotions are negative, they get in the way. Well, if you do that, you'll find out, actually, it works exactly the opposite way. You got to feel more. Another pillar I'll give you here is being proactive. You can take sort of a lazy backseat approach to life, where it's like you're in the backseat of the car and you're letting somebody else drive you. Or you can take a proactive approach, which is what I recommend you do. Proactive approach means you want to be in the driver's seat, and you will not stand for situations where people ask you to be in the back seat. Not when it comes to your own life. Now, of course, in other situations, you can take a back seat, but when it comes to setting the direction of your own life, you have to be proactive about that. You have to be proactive going out there, learning, researching, looking for things you're passionate about, setting goals for yourself, motivating yourself. Whatever that takes, maybe visualization exercises or whatever to motivate yourself. Being proactive like this, going above and beyond the bare minimum of life. And this applies to everything you do. So if you're going to school, be proactive in school. That means you don't just do the bare minimum to pass the test or to get a C or even a B or even an A. That's not good enough. If you're truly proactive about learning, you're not going to be satisfied with the learning that you get in school. You're going to want to read books on your own. After you're done with homework, then you pick up a book and just read whatever book you want that you're passionate about. That's what proactivity looks like in school. And at work, you don't just go in there to work and just do the job that your boss tells you to do. You're proactive. You have your own ideas and visions about how this job can be done better, how you can help your boss more, how the company might be better served by some other idea that you have. That's what it means to be proactive at work. And so on across the board throughout your whole life. Be proactive. You're here. You want to be engaged in life. To be engaged in life, you have to find something about it that you enjoy. And look at how much there is around you to enjoy. Of course, there's dark stuff, there's negative stuff. I'm not being naive here. There's a lot of darkness to life. But even so, there's still something you can find that you would really enjoy. Whether it's art, music, engineering, design, architecture, history, science, spirituality, sexuality, so many things. And really, we're living in a time now that you can literally create a successful career in any of these fields. The bottleneck towards your success, your material success, if we're talking about money, in any field is going to be your passion. If you want to be materially successful, find something you're ridiculously passionate about that you can pour thousands of hours into. develop mastery in something. This is another pillar that I have for you. You need to pick at least one or two things in your life that you will develop mastery in, that you will be working towards. That doesn't mean you have to master it now. It just means you pick a thing, you're concrete about what that thing is, and then you get to work mastering it, and you slowly chip away at that on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis for decades. So again, this should be something you're deeply interested in and passionate about and curious about. It could be martial arts, could be music, could be film critique, could be video game design, could be web design, could be calligraphy, it could be yoga, it could be weightlifting, it could be science, it could be astronomy, it could be geology, it could be hunting for dinosaurs, it could be art, it could be tailoring or sewing stuff. Like, it really makes no difference as long as you enjoy it and you find some deeper meaning in it. And you're constructing that meaning, remember. So you pick one or two of these fields and you develop skill in that because you want to become useful to mankind. This is important because going back to that original thing about your job and your career and your sense of life purpose, you see, since you're going to be working a third to a half of your life, waking hours, going towards work, for you not to be struggling materially in your life, for you to have the kind of luxury and comfort and freedom that you want, you know, a decent place to live, decent food, the ability to send your kids to school or to college, the ability to pay for your medical expenses, stuff like this, the ability to go travel, do some vacationing, this kind of stuff. You don't need millions and millions of dollars, but you want a decent salary. How do you get a decent salary? The only legitimate way to get a decent salary in society is to become useful to society in some way. Now, you can become useful to society on its terms or on your terms. If you do it on its terms, that means that, society tells you, hey, we need somebody to work at Starbucks pouring coffees. We'll pay you $10 an hour. Here you go, do this monotonous job for the next 20 years, and we'll be paying you a minor wage with fairly crappy benefits, and you can lose your job at any time. And you can do that. That's on society's terms, see? Because you weren't proactive enough, you weren't passionate enough to go out there and really master something, develop some serious, valuable skill in something. Now, the alternative scenario is that you become so passionate about something, you spend years and years studying it, exploring it, developing skill and talent in it, and then what happens is that you get so good at that thing that you're able to create and produce some original, unique work that other people find valuable in society. It could be music, art, film, engineering schematics, architectural schematics, some business skills that you have that you're able to help somebody run their business, so they hire you for that. Maybe some lawyering skills, some doctoring skills, whatever. The better you get, the rarer you are compared to others around you. The more valuable your skill set is, the more people are willing to pay you to help them and to partake in whatever creative work that you're doing, to view it, to buy it, to hire your services, whatever. And from this, upon this foundation, you can then build a relatively comfortable life for yourself with freedom and such that you never really have to worry about much about money at all. Whereas if you don't do that, if you just do the default, and by the way, if you're not proactive and you're not ambitious, you won't get that. If you just are lazy and you do the default, what you'll get is you'll get the Starbucks example. You'll have a boring, monotonous job. And if you get that, then you'll be worrying and stressing about money for the rest of your life. And also your opportunities for exploring reality will be severely limited because you won't have the freedom to take a vacation whenever you want. You won't have the money to buy the kind of stuff you want that will help you to explore life. See, for me, money is quite important. not because I want a fancy car and this sorts of stuff, although, of course, nothing wrong with that. And you can enjoy some of those things to some degree. But more importantly, what you want is you want the freedom that money buys you. Money buys you the freedom to work on your own time, to have a more flexible schedule, to not have to be worried, to not have to always take the worst available job just because you need it, just because it pays you the money. You know, sometimes you can pass that up in order to go for a better job, but to do that, you need some money to hold you over in the meantime. Money allows you to fund your ideas. If you are an entrepreneurial person, you have some creative ideas, you're going to need money for that. You're going to need supplies, you're going to need equipment, you're going to maybe need time off of work to work on your personal projects and so forth. I recommend that you're always working on some personal career-related projects in your life. Even if you have a job, traditional job, have some career-related projects that you're working on. Some music project, some film project, some engineering project, whatever. Through these projects is how you're going to develop and build your skills and your experience. Never, ever, ever let the phrase, "but I don't know how," stop you from doing something or from attempting something. If there's something you don't know how to do, research it. Buy books about it. Go to Google and type it in there. Read articles about it. Find videos about it on YouTube. Ask friends about it. Ask people about it. Find the people who know how. You don't need to know how to do anything in life. All you need to have is you need to have the desire and the clear intent that you want to do it. From that, everything else will be generated, as if by magic. And without that, nothing will happen. Even if you know how to fly to the moon, you're not going to fly to the moon unless you have a deep ambition and desire to do it. On the other hand, if you have only an ambition and desire to fly to the moon and you have no idea how to do it, you can still do it. Because you'll be able to use the ambition and the desire to figure out how. To read, to research, to hire the people you need, to build you the stuff you need to get you to the moon. Imagine this, that if right now, if you're relatively young, if you're in your 20s or your 30s, and right now you set the intention in your mind that the most important thing for me in my life is that I'm going to be on the moon. I have no idea how I'm going to do it. I don't have the money. I don't have the skills. I don't have the engineering know-how. All I know is that I want to be on the moon by the time my life is over. If you set that intention for yourself, I can almost guarantee that you will do it. You will find some way to do it. That doesn't mean you're going to build your own rocket ship. Or maybe you will. But it could mean that you become a Wall Street stockbroker, earn yourself a bunch of money, earn yourself $1 billion, like Warren Buffett or something, in the stock market, and then use that money to build yourself a rocket ship. That's what you would do if you really desired to get to the moon. Now, of course, most people have no such desire, so it never happens. It's really that simple. Like, it's not, desire is not a binary thing, like I desire it or I don't. No. There's many, many degrees of desire. How much do you desire something? And then how ambitious are you about it? The next point I want to make is that it's very important that you understand that human beings are different. It's going to seem to you for the first 20 or 30 years of your life at least that human beings are very similar. You're going to look at human beings as though they are copies of you. It's going to seem that they feel like you, they behave like you, they look like you. It takes a while. It takes a good 30 years or so of observing people to start to notice the important distinctions and differences between people. So what I want you to understand about people really quickly is the following thing. If you just go to a shopping mall or a crowded area and you observe people walking around at Walmart or something, and just sit there and people watch for half an hour, observe people's physical appearances. only pay attention to how their bodies are different. If you sit there and you do that for half an hour, what you will see is how seriously different people's bodies are. You're going to see short people, tall people, skinny people, fat people, really, really fat people. You're going to see white people, black people, Asian people, Indian people, Somali people, African people. You're going to see disabled people. You're going to see people that are beautiful, ugly, and somewhere in the middle. You're going to see people with lots of pimples. You're going to see people with lots of moles. You're going to see some people walking funny. You're going to see some people with only one arm or only one leg. Some will be in wheelchairs. Some will be old. Some will be young. Some will be in the middle. Some will be really, really old. Some will be just little infants. Some will have gigantic breasts. Some will have no breasts. And everything in between. Some will have weird colored hair, tattoos, and piercings, and all this sort of stuff. Others won't. They will also, of course, all be dressed differently. Some will be dressed real nice. Some will be dressed like homeless people, and everything in between. So you observe all that. That's you observing the person from the outside. Now, I want you to translate that lesson to what's going on their inside, their mind. So the most important point here is not that people are different externally, physically. What's more important is that people are different internally in their minds. So the key mistake and trap that is made here is that because we can't see the mind, we tend to assume that, well, yeah, physically, it's hard to deny physical differences. You know, there's a man, there's a woman, they're obviously different. One's black, one's white, one's fat, one's skinny, whatever. Very clear. But we can't so clearly look into a person's mind. So what we do for the first 30 or 40 years of our life is we sort of project our own mind into others, and we tend to assume that, well, if I am introverted, then that person must be introverted. Or if I like going to a party, then everyone likes going to parties. Or if I like being a doctor, then most people should like being doctors, and so on. This is not the case. This is not the case. In fact, people are so different in their minds that consider the following possibility. This is a radical possibility, is that imagine that your mind is so different. Remember, like I said, the mind and physical reality at a deep level, metaphysically, are actually interconnected. They're not separate things. People's minds are so different that it's almost as though they're living in different realities. Now, of course, our realities interpenetrate, which is why we can all stop at the same stoplight and not crash into each other. Our realities are coherent and consistent in that way. But there are other ways in which our realities are not, where they're individuated, we might say. And so this is the point I want to emphasize here, is really try to understand that people have different personalities, different genetics, different brain chemistry, different ideologies and software that is running their mind, a different operating system. Sometimes you're talking to somebody, it seems, it's like physically you two might look even close and similar, but internally the software that you're running is so different that it's like communicating between a Mac and a Windows PC, or even like a Linux, or even something totally alien. Sometimes it's like talking to an alien. You're just not on the same page at all. People have different levels of ambition, different levels of motivation, different fear profiles, what they're afraid of, different degrees of neurosis and trauma that they experienced in their past, different energy levels, different moods. Some are more happy, some are more depressed, some are more positive, some are more negative, optimistic, pessimistic, whatever. Some are introverted, some are extroverted. Different personality types. People are at different stages of development, different levels of consciousness. And sometimes they even have different access to different aspects of reality. They don't see the same things that you or I see. Of course, we like to lock some of those people up in mental institutions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that something's wrong with them. It just might mean that they're different. And you might be one of those people. You might be different. So the reason I'm telling you this is, first of all, when you recognize how different people's minds are, that helps you to, again, really try to customize life to yourself. Because what works for somebody else does not necessarily work for you. You can't just assume that. That would be true if everyone's minds were the same, but that's not the case. Also, it means that advice isn't the same for everybody. Some advice will work for some types of minds, but not other types of minds. This also helps you to start to turn inwards more and to honor your own self and to really question yourself deeper. Because life is not just a process of exploring external reality and other people. It's a process of exploring your own self. Because you don't really know who you are. And I don't mean in the Enlightenment sense. I mean, you don't know who you are as a personality, as an ego. You don't know who you are. You don't know what kind of food you like when you start life. You don't know what kind of sex you like. You don't know what kind of marriage or children you would like to have, or whether you would like to have them at all. You don't know what kind of career you'd like to have. You don't know what kind of school you'd like to go to, and what kind of country you'd like to live in, what kind of weather you like. You don't know these things until you go through a deep process of discovering yourself at a personality level. And that's what the first few decades of your life are spent doing after you're an adult. Your 20s and your 30s, you're really in a deep process of discovering yourself as a personality. And this is a very important process. A lot of people skip over this process, and they skip over all of my advice in general. And instead what they do is they waste their time falling into the trap of entertainment, or just going with the flow of what society, the latest trends in society, which is usually low consciousness, low brow type of stuff, which now leads me to a very important point that connects back with the idea of ideology and belief systems. So you were born into a culture, whatever culture in whatever country you're in, whatever era you're living in. This culture has been programming you and indoctrinating you, literally indoctrinating you with beliefs, desires, fears, philosophies, attitudes, ideologies since you were born. And if you're listening to this at age 15 or age 20 or age 25, something like that, you're still young, but your mind has already been programmed by 10, 15, or 20 years of this programming of your culture. And this has already deeply screwed up your ability to understand reality. So a significant, the most significant challenge you'll be dealing for the rest of your life, if you really want to understand reality in yourself, is the epistemic challenge of figuring out what's true and what isn't, and deconstructing all of the programming that you received during the first 20 years of your life, through your childhood and through your education, basically through the first 12 years, and if you went to college, then college as well. That is like the foundation that is set for you, but that foundation comes from your culture, and any limits or bottlenecks or falsehoods or deceptions or lies within your culture are going to get programmed into you. In fact, not only will that happen, it's already happened. But you don't know what all those are. So in the process of discovering yourself, you're going to have to shed layer upon layer of all the false programming and conditioning that you've been programmed with, that is keeping you from living a free, open life. You see, the way human development works is very, very delicate and fragile, especially during the first 20 years of a human's development. Because when you come into this life as a baby, you're so fragile that any sort of shock to your system very early on in life will have a cascading effect and cause you to become very dysfunctional for the rest of your life. If you have a bad mother who abuses you, or a father who molests you, or something like that, that will deeply traumatize you. But don't think that trauma is just something that happens, in rare instances of horrible neglect or family abuse. Basically, all of us, in a certain sense, grew up in dysfunctional families to various degrees. Now, granted, some of them were extremely dysfunctional, others only minorly dysfunctional, but still, there were many layers of dysfunction in your family because whatever dysfunction your parents had, they transferred it onto you. They couldn't help themselves. That's how dysfunction works. Because your dysfunction infects your interactions with others. So what happened was that you received various kinds of traumas throughout the first 5, 10, 15 years of your life, especially. Incidents with your parents, maybe you were bullied at school, maybe people made fun of you. Sometimes it's minor stuff. It can literally be, you in school and somebody just laughs at you or pulls your pants down in front of the class, something like that. And that event can traumatize you. It's not a really serious event, just really nothing in the grand scheme of things, but something like that can traumatize you. And it can leave you afraid of being social with others. It can leave you resentful or jealous or depressive or neurotic in some other way. And so the reason that I bring up this trauma business is because almost all of us have it to some degree. Some of us have it very badly. Some of us have it moderately. Almost none of us have it minorly. Moderate. You should probably assume you have moderate amount of trauma. This trauma is often repressed, swept under the rug, forgotten. And it seems like it's not a very big part of your life now. Once you're 30, 40, 50, you might have forgotten all about it. But actually, it's a big deal, and it's very, very deep within your subconscious, deep within the foundations of your operating system of your mind, and even deeper, really, at the kernel level. So the earlier you receive the trauma, the closer to the kernel of your operating system it's going to be. The later in your life, like if you got some trauma in your 20s or 30s, it's still a problem, but it's going to be more towards the surface level, not so deep. The deeper the trauma, the harder it is to heal. The more surface level, the easier it is to move past. So the reason I bring this up, this trauma business, is because that trauma is going to be like a weight around your shoulder, around your neck, dragging you down for the rest of your life. So one of the most important things I recommend you do in order to free yourself and to really start to go deep in life and be passionate about life, because the trauma will prevent you from being able to be passionate in life, is you're going to have to heal yourself of that trauma. Now, that's a tricky thing to explain how to do. I don't have time to explain it all here. I'll have separate episodes about that in the future. But I'll just say this. The deeper it is, the deeper the work will have to be. You can work with a psychotherapist. You can use psychedelics to heal that trauma. You can just do introspection and contemplation or journaling by yourself. You can heal it by talking it out with an intimate partner. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can heal that trauma. There's people you can hire, who you can work with to help you with that stuff. Coaches, even psychics and so forth can help you to deal with that trauma and get over it and to have you face it and confront it. But this is very, very important for you to do, especially if you had a good dose of it because you grew up in some dysfunctional family in some dysfunctional part of the world. Dysfunctional families exist everywhere. They exist in functional and dysfunctional parts of the world, so don't confuse those two things. So be honest with yourself. Ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much trauma do I think I had in the first 15 or 20 years of my life? This trauma could have been physical, could have been emotional, could have been verbal, could have been fights you got into with your siblings or with your parents. It could have been financial. Maybe you grew up in crippling poverty. That created trauma for you. Or maybe even just mild poverty. It could be because your dad or your mom went to jail. It could be because you got arrested when you were a teen for doing something stupid. Whatever. It could be because you got bullied at school or you bullied others at school. You were picked on, you were laughed on, you became embarrassed. Basically, whenever you weren't in some way approved of or loved, you got trauma. Something that shocked you or scared you and denied you the love and acceptance that you should have gotten. That's what creates trauma. This trauma then creates a sort of neediness, and then you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to get that thing that you've been desperately craving, which is love, in that specific form that you wanted. It might be sexual, it might be financial, it might be you want fame because your mother didn't love you, so now you want to become famous as a compensating sort of force. Or your family was poor and your dad wasn't able to afford to buy you the kind of shoes you wanted. So then when you grew up, now you're going to be spending the rest of your life chasing money. Or maybe you were picked on in school and bullied, and now you're going to spend the rest of your life being an asshole towards others who remind you of those bullies. Stuff like that. This becomes very dysfunctional and erotic, and it robs you of the passion and the clarity you need to be able to pursue reality deeper, to understand reality deeper, and to live deeper. So again, remember, don't let the how-to question prevent you from resolving a problem. So if you have some of this trauma and you're thinking right now, well, but Leo, how? I don't know how, you didn't tell me how to fix my trauma. How do I do it? It doesn't matter how. Just understand that you need to resolve it, and then set the desire and the ambition that this is something that I'm going to resolve, because I'm not going to let this thing weigh me down and cause me to not fulfill on my amazing life that I'm building for myself. I'm not going to let some trauma get in the way of that. I'm going to find the expert that I need to heal me. I'm going to find the books or watch the right videos or take the courses or hire the professionals that I need. Or maybe I'll even just figure it out myself. You can do that too. Grab a journal and start contemplating, and you can figure it out. You can get to the bottom of it. But anyways, enough about that. Now, since we're running out of time here, I really want to get to the core of the advice that I have for you. So we've covered a lot of sort of practical stuff. By this point, what have we covered? We've covered a lot of career. We covered a lot of taking responsibility and being proactive and having motivation and passion. This is all good. This is setting up a foundation. We talked about learning. We talked about understanding reality. We talked about truth and honesty. All great stuff. We still haven't really touched upon health. Very quickly, let me touch upon the pillar of health. When you're young, it's easy to take your health for granted. But as you get older, health becomes more and more of a challenge. So I talked about how your culture imprints you with a bunch of bad conditioning that you're going to have to undo and deconstruct. One of those is health. And one of the biggest traps your culture will throw you in, unless you're careful, is they will feed you garbage and poison. They will toxify your brain and make it such that it's going to be difficult for you to properly use your mind. And also it's going to be difficult for you to feel properly into your body, because you're going to be so overweight and so overfilled with toxins and chemicals. So what I recommend for you at a very high level here is learn about proper nutrition. Go buy some books about how to eat healthy and start to look carefully at the kind of food that you're eating. Our culture right now and our society is quite dysfunctional and quite toxic. And it's very commercialized, which means that the food you get at restaurants, in fast food places, this is not high quality organic food. It's made to be the saltiest, sugariest, unhealthiest food that is the cheapest to produce and tastes the best, right? But if you fall into this trap of eating at these restaurants and at this fast food and eating all this junk food, potato chips and cheeseburgers at McDonald's and Coca-Cola and candy and various soft drinks and cake and, Hot Pockets and all this sorts of stuff, pizza, if this is your diet, you are not going to be able to fulfill on living an amazing life. It's going to catch up with you, and it's going to turn into a glass ceiling for you. So I would take precautions. I would read some books about nutrition, basically focus on eating whole foods, vegetables, fruits, high quality meats and fats. Yes, it costs more, but you need that raw fuel, raw, clean fuel in order to do everything else in your life. You're going to need those energy levels. You need to keep your energy levels high. You're going to need to keep your brain functioning well. Speaking of which, drink purified, high-quality water. Don't consume products and foods that might contain heavy metals like mercury and lead. There's really good research now that shows that actually getting lead and mercury into your brain results in rising criminality rates in populations. It's quite bad. In the 1970s and 80s in the United States, we had very high crime rates. And the reason we had such high crime rates, they discovered, is that actually they passed some regulations which improved the environmental pollutants, basically. Chemical companies were no longer allowed to just dump pollution into like lead and mercury and stuff into rivers and lakes and into our food supply. And then we saw in the 1990s, after that legislation took effect and there were some regulations on those industries, we saw that the crime rates fell. And not much really changed society except that now there was lower lead concentrations in babies and children's brains. So take that stuff seriously. As you go forward and you want to reach the deepest levels of understanding, you're going to need a very clear mind. You're going to need to be able to focus. You're not going to be able to do that when you have a bunch of chemicals and toxic stuff that you polluted your brain and your body with over 10 or 20 or 30 years of eating junk food and drinking dirty water and this sort of stuff. So you need that basic foundation. Also recommend you learn to exercise a bit as well, whether it's weightlifting or cardio or a combination of the above or yoga or whatever. Okay, so we got that. Now let's move on to the most important piece of advice I have for you. Now we're going to get metaphysical and a bit spiritual, okay? And we can't help it because in the end, life is a metaphysical and spiritual thing. So here we go. Reality is not a physical system like I alluded to in the past. It's consciousness. Everything that you see or experience is consciousness, different levels, gradations, and layers of consciousness. Consciousness is a very complex thing. And the way that you understand consciousness is by experiencing it and by being conscious of it. Who'd have thunk? See, my body is made of consciousness. This video, if you're watching it on YouTube, is made of consciousness. If you're listening to this as an audio, the audio waves that you're hearing are made of consciousness. Your ears are made out of consciousness. Your brain is made out of consciousness. Everything is made out of consciousness. Why is this so important? You might wonder. You might say, well, Leo, what's the difference? Whether it's consciousness or it's atoms, what's the difference? There's an enormous difference. Because if reality is made of atoms, then that makes it seem as though reality is separate and distant from you. Again, it feels like you're falling into that scientific trap of like there's the object and there's the subject, and the subject is separate from the object. That means I'm over here and I'm looking at the atoms over there. But that's not your experience of reality. Your experience of reality is that you're meshed in with it. This physical room you're sitting in is a part of your head. There's no boundary between it and you. This is very important because this opens up a totally radical new possibility. Because if reality was separate from you, external to you, then there's always a sort of a boundary or a veil through which you can never pierce to get to the root bottom of reality. Maybe you can look at reality through a microscope, but you need a microscope. And even then, you're just looking at some atoms and it doesn't really reveal much about reality to you. But remember, our number one priority is to understand reality. And the deeper we understand it, the better we are able to live. Because reality is all that there is. So if you don't understand it, you'll be living poorly. And if you do understand it, you'll be living splendidly. So to live the most splendid life, you want to understand reality at the deepest level. And to do that, you need to understand that it's all consciousness. And you need to, once you grasp this possibility, once you grasp that the object and the subject are actually interconnected, that means that you now have direct access to reality itself. Reality is not hidden from you. You're able to access it because it's all consciousness, just different levels of consciousness. And so the number one key to living a good life is to be more conscious and to raise your level of consciousness. And there are many levels and different degrees and states of consciousness. Right now, you happen to be in one state. When you're sleeping, you're in another state. When you're dreaming, you're in another state. When you're sexually aroused, you're in another state. When you're drunk on alcohol, you're in another state, and so on. Reality is infinite states of consciousness. That's all that it is. But it's very important what kind of states you're in. You can be in some very bad states, very contracted states, and you can be in some very good states, very expansive states. The more conscious you become, the more understanding you have of how everything truly is. The less conscious you are, the more you're sort of in a daze, the more you're a zombie, the more you're sleepwalking through life, the more you lie to yourself, the more you manipulate, the more selfish you are, the more fearful you are, the more petty you are. And this now leads us to sort of the key challenge of life, is that really life is about two forces: fear versus love. Those are the two forces. But I'll also phrase it this way: it's about selfishness versus selflessness. This is what all of life boils down to at a metaphysical level. And really, when I say metaphysical, I also mean physical. Sometimes people hear the word metaphysical and they think, oh, that's some woo-woo New Age stuff. No, no, no. We're talking physics here, basically. Your life is run by fear and love. All of humanity is run by fear of love, and so is the entire universe. This is not what science will teach you, but science, like I said, is operating under a false materialistic paradigm. So, in your life, I want you to really deeply notice that you're either afraid of things and you're doing things out of fear, or you're doing things out of love. Now, love is a complex notion. I'm not going to explain it fully here. I have in the past in other episodes. You can look for those. But, we talked a lot about passion and desire and ambition. What do you think that is? What do you think desire is? When you connect with the miracle that your life is, what do you think that is? That's love. We talked about trauma. When you don't get the love that you needed from your parents, your mother especially, but also your father, your siblings, your friends, your coworkers, your teachers, your students, and all that. When you don't get enough love, what happens is that you recoil and you go into fear. And that creates trauma, it creates dysfunction, makes you needy, and then that sabotages your whole life. So if you want to know why you're here and what life is really about, life is a training ground to teach you how to love and how to be selfless. And these are difficult things to learn. Learning these things requires going through great struggle and suffering, falling into many traps, and much trial and error. So what reality is, what the universe is, it's not just some stupid physical system that exists randomly because of some big bang and some molecules bouncing around, and then just there happened to be a planet Earth and there happened to be some apes who evolved into some humans. It's not that. The entire system has been designed by consciousness so that consciousness can teach itself what it is, which is love. And so that it can explore different ways in which love gets expressed and how love gets manifested and actualized. And of course, fear is just an absence of love. So it's not like fear and love are two polar opposite forces. It's actually one thing. You could call it fear-love. Fear is love of a very contracted sort. And love is, of course, love fully expanded without any fear. So think of it like light. If we have a dimmer switch here for this room, I could tune it down and the lights come down until it becomes totally dark. That would be absolute fear, terror. If you encountered a grizzly bear in the woods, that dimmer switch would go all the way to black. You'd be so scared, especially if he was chasing you down. And then if we tune this dimmer switch upwards, then that moves us more towards brightness, more and more light is just more and more love. You see, so the reason it's important to understand that everything is consciousness is because when you think everything is atoms, the way science tells you, when you think that way, then it seems like, well, but love, how does love fit into physical reality? Because physical reality is over here, it's a bunch of atoms. And my mind is over here, I'm the subject, and I experience love. These are feelings, these are like girly emotional feelings. Love is just a feeling. And so it seems like these two things are separated, and it seems like now, oh, Leo, you're talking about love, but that's just some hippy-dippy woo-woo bullshit. Then there's physical reality. That's more primary. This is what's real. This is fluffy stuff. That's under the materialist paradigm. But when you realize and acknowledge that this here is consciousness and everything is consciousness, when you understand that, now it becomes a lot easier to understand that love can be a fundamental feature of reality, because reality never was some molecules or atoms. It was consciousness. Technically, the molecules and atoms that scientists study, they are consciousness. Consciousness is dreaming up molecules and atoms. It's also dreaming up scientists and science, and it's dreaming up the entire universe. The entire universe is not a physical object. The entire universe is a giant infinite mind of unlimited imaginary potential, which means that life is imaginary. That's right, you're in a dream. And even though you're in a dream, and I'm just a figment of your own dream, nevertheless, life is still serious. It's still the realest thing there is because there's no alternative to the dream. Therefore, you've confused the dream for reality. Now, I don't want to get too bogged down into the sort of the philosophy and metaphysics of this. The reason I'm bringing this up is just to help ground the notion of fear and love. So this is actually very practical. In your life, every single day, you're feeling fear, and you're feeling love, and you're sort of getting tugged in either direction by these different forces. And the quality of your life is going to hinge upon how much you give into the fear versus how much you pursue the love. Pursuing the love is difficult. But then again, like I said, consciousness being a giant, infinite, universal mind, what else is it here to do? It's got nothing else to do but to explore different ways of loving itself. You see, consciousness can either be in love with itself or it can recoil from itself. When you see something nasty or ugly or vicious or evil, quote unquote evil, you recoil. That's consciousness recoiling at its own self. Your job in this life is to learn to love life more and more and more and more and more, especially those things that recoil you. To love them more and more and more until eventually you can become completely unconditionally loving, or at least try to approach that as much as you can. And to do that, that requires becoming more and more and more selfless, which is the opposite of selfish. So the more selfish you are in life, the worse your life will be. The more selfless you are in life, the better your life will be. And this is one of the most counterintuitive things, because simplistically it seems like, well, but if I live my life selfishly, that sounds like a good strategy, right? Because like, I'll be selfish and I'll hoard myself a bunch of money, and I'll be selfish and I'll just, be manipulative in my relationships, and I'll be selfish and I'll just lie to people in order to get them to do what I want. And I'll be selfish and I'll just take all the good food and leave none for everybody else, but I will get it. And when I get it, I get all the pleasure and everything comes to me. So if everything's coming to me, then that's what life is about, right? Life is all about attracting everything that I want, the most pleasurable stuff, to me. And then that's the height of life. That's what it seems like. And then what you discover after maybe 30, 40, 50 years of trying that is that it's exactly the opposite. Life, the quality of your life, is about how much love you can radiate out to others. To the point where you love so much, there's nothing left of you. You've given all of yourself away. Now, I don't mean doing this in a neurotic sense, where some women do this in a relationship, where they try to please the man, try to please the husband over and over, bend over backwards for the husband, and whatever, the husband abuses them and they still bend over backwards and they keep pleasing the husband. Like, no, I'm not talking about this abusive wife syndrome. That's a neurotic form of love. I'm talking about giving and radiating love on your terms. So remember I talked about passion and what do you want to do with your life? You've been given this miracle of life, and really the question that, so to speak, God has put to you now is this one. How do you want to radiate love? You've been given this opportunity, and now God is telling you like this. Okay, show me what you got. Show me what you can do. We've got consciousness here. We've got this amazing world that I've created for you. All this stuff that you can do. You can go out there. You can be a murderer. You can be a thief. You can be a dirty politician. You can be a crook. You can be some Wall Street broker. You can be a doctor. You can be a Mother Teresa. You can be a saint. You can be a Jesus. You can be a Buddha. You can, you can make money. You can have children. You can make a family. You can make music and games, and you can be an engineer. You can do anything. You can go to the moon. Out of all these things, what are you going to choose to do? All of these things are different manifestations of love. Some are low manifestations, some are very high manifestations. How are you going to manifest your love? How godlike are you willing to be? And what godlike means is simply selfless and loving. If you were ever to become infinitely selfless and infinitely loving, you would become God. And to the extent that you're not, is the extent to which you're still God, but you are lost within the lower realms of consciousness. You're not conscious enough to see why you should be selfless and why the smartest and wisest, most intelligent choice and path in life is the most selfless and loving one. See? You can't see that yet because you're not conscious enough of it yet. And the only way you can become more conscious of it is by living through life and going through this trial and error process and suffering through it. And it's the suffering that will teach you how to be more loving and how to be more selfless. So if you really want the best life possible, try to understand what I'm telling you here. Try to notice that it's true and commit to being as loving and selfless as you can be on your terms, not in a dysfunctional, neurotic way. You're not being loving and selfless because you want to live up to some image of being a saint. And you're not being loving and selfless because you're going to do that for somebody else so that they can repay you even more. You see, because that's actually a hidden form of selfishness. That's, in a sense, what the wife is doing, the abusive wife is doing with the husband, is that she is actually trying to please him overly much, even though he's abusing her. And she keeps doing that because she needs him, and there's a sort of a codependency there. And if he breaks up with her, she's going to suffer, and she doesn't want to go through that. So, see, in that sense, it's not genuine love. That's a neurotic form of love that comes from past childhood traumas and so forth. What I'm talking about is just a pure radiation of yourself, of your personality, of how you want to live, of how you want to use your body, how do you want to use your creativity, your God-given talents and all of this. I like to say that life is like a sandbox game. It's not like one of those linear games like Call of Duty or one of those Mario side-scrollers. You know, a Mario side-scroller, you're just scrolling in one direction the whole time. There's no choice in, you know, where you go. Every obstacle is already pre-designed, preset. Life is more like SimCity or Minecraft, where you're just thrown into this matrix of possibility, and you get to decide which things you want to actualize. And you can be a good person, you can be a cruel person, you can be a manipulative person, you can be a generous person, you can be highly creative, you can be a great lover, you can raise beautiful children, or you can do the opposite of those things. You know, you can abuse your children, you can beat your children, you can be a terrible lover, you can be a needy lover, you can be demanding and exploitative and abusive and all this sorts of stuff. And there's no judgment in it. There's no good or bad. Because remember, all meaning is created by you. It's an experiment in creativity. That's literally what life is, an experiment in creativity. Not just life, but the entire universe. It's an explosion of creativity. So I recommend that you don't fall into the trap of judging what is being created around you. Don't waste time judging others, criticizing others. Don't waste time judging yourself or criticizing yourself. Simply focus on what you want to create. And try to radiate as much love as you can stomach. And then when you find that you're not able to stomach anymore because you've hit your limit, Then you ask yourself, but how can I love even more? Because I've hit my limit, how can I raise my limit? That's the question you ask. And when you ask that question, and then you don't know how, and you say, but how? I don't know how. And then you remember, oh yeah, Leo told me I don't need to know how. All I need to have is the desire, the passion, the ambition for it. And then what you realize that I don't need to know how to love. I need to know that I want to love. And so you set that desire and that intention very clearly to be selfless, to be godlike, and then you work towards that. And then you do the research and you attract the people and the circumstances and the books and the videos and courses and professional help that you need that will help you to be more loving, to raise your ceiling for love and selflessness. And you keep doing that and doing that and doing that and doing that and doing that until you've aced life. Ta-da! That's how you live the good life. And that, in a nutshell, is what spirituality is about. Now, let me make a few final remarks about spirituality, because spirituality is a very problematic topic, filled with even more traps than all the other topics. So many traps within spirituality. The biggest trap, of course, is ideology and belief. Like we've already said, your culture has a bunch of preconceived notions about how reality works and what spirituality is, and most of them are wrong. So the only way that you're really going to deeply understand the things that I'm sharing with you here, because this is advanced advice. This is not advice that you're going to hear almost anywhere else in society or in your culture. So it took me 20 years of hard labor and brutal trial and error. A lot of suffering went into discovering this advice to the point where I can just give it to you off the cuff here. This is off the cuff advice. I didn't take any notes, just off the top of my head here. The only reason I'm able to give this advice to you is because I've went through hell to figure this out, because I really wanted to figure it out, and I finally figured it out. And it's possible to figure it out, believe it or not. But in order to do so, you have to really be careful with how your mind tricks you. And you have to deconstruct all of your beliefs about reality and all of your ideologies, and you have to be completely and radically open-minded. And you have to derive all of this for yourself. You're not going to be able to go read some Bible and get this sort of depth of understanding. Even listening to this video, you might say, well, but Leo, I got all the info, I got all the answers right here. You gave me all the answers, assuming they're right. Let's just assume for a second they're right. If they're all right, you still haven't really gotten the answers, because like I said before, you have to derive the answers for yourself. It's helpful for me to tell you this stuff, but I went through 20 years to derive these answers for myself. So the effect these answers have on me is very different than the effect they have on you. You have not gone through those 10 or 20 years yet. So you're going to have to go through that process. So I recommend you get started. And if you're wondering, well, Leo, but what if you're trying to trick me, or what if you're deluded, or how do I even know any of this advice is good? What if some of this advice is bad? Well, here's my advice about that. Of course, you shouldn't believe me. If I was asking you to believe me, or to turn this into an ideology, then that would just be the ideology or belief trap. I'm suggesting something very different. I'm suggesting you test this through trial and error over the next 10 or 20 years. And hey, if you don't want to start with my ideas, go read some other book or pick up some other ideas. But you got to start somewhere when you're doing testing or experimentation, and this is true of how science works. You have to start somewhere. So where are you going to start? Well, you start with your best intuition of where you think is the best place to start with. So hopefully, if you're intuitive and you have a good mind, then the stuff that I said here will resonate with that intuition, and you will realize that this is a very good place to start by following this advice. But if you aren't wise enough to see that, by all means, go follow other advice. Go shoot yourself up with some heroin, or go have a bunch of sex, or go buy yourself a Ferrari. You know, whatever you got to do, experiment with life. In the end, it's a trial and error process. See? And that's why you shouldn't judge people, because they're just exploring reality. Some of them are exploring it in stupid ways, but then again, how else do you learn but doing stupid things? So, because consciousness is all there is, and this is consciousness, and everything is consciousness, you have direct access to reality and to truth at all times right now, right here. You're directly connected with it. Reality and truth is not somewhere hidden behind the veil or curtain of perception. Perception and appearance is consciousness, is reality. This is it. You have direct access to it. You are it. So don't underestimate how deeply you can understand yourself. You can understand yourself totally, infinitely. In fact, that's what I suggest you try to do, is gain infinite self-understanding and see where that leads you. It's possible because you are conscious right now, and that consciousness is everything that there is. There's different levels of it, though. You're going to have to train your mind to access those other levels. How? Again, you can always do research to find out how. Right now, we're more concerned about why and developing the desire in you to do so, to want to do so. Direct experience is king. That's one of my principles. Direct experience is king. You right now are experiencing reality. Experience, notice, is all that you have of reality. You don't have anything else. Can you name me one thing that you have of reality that has not been experienced by you? Try. Name one thing that you have not experienced, which is real. You can't. Anything real, you have experienced, because reality is experience. Look, turn within and look. These are not things I'm asking you to believe. You don't believe me and take on as an ideology that direct experience is king. You test it in your direct experience and see what's going on. Can you invalidate it? Try. Of course, it's tricky because your mind can always trick you. Your mind can always tell you that, oh yeah, there is something besides experience. There's reality behind the experience. Well, that's part of the work is noticing how your own mind tricks you and how you get, sucked into these various kinds of philosophical, metaphysical traps and epistemic traps. So you do have to be very careful. You have to practice observation, meditation. You have to be aware. You have to turn inwards, self-reflect, introspect, question deeply, contemplate. I have videos and episodes covering all those different topics and how to do them. And you can find books that have been written about this and so forth. But in the end, everything I said here, it has no truth or no validity to it unless you validate it for yourself in your direct experience. So really, all that I'm suggesting you do is I suggest that you turn your life into a scientific investigation, into a scientific experiment. And the aim of your experiment is to simply figure out what is reality, what is consciousness, what is life, and how do I live the good life? How do I live the best life possible? These are the 4 or 5 key questions you need. And as long as you're deeply curious about these questions and you contemplate them every day and you really desire answers to them, that's really enough. From that, you will be able to derive everything else that I said here. Might take you 20, 30, 40 years. You'll have to go through hell to do it the way that I did. But eventually you'll do it. And hey, what else is there to do in life? Have you got a better plan? Have you got a better idea? What are you going to do? Are you going to spend the next 10, 20 years working some dead-end job, coming back home dead tired, turning on Netflix and sitting there crashing for 3 hours, falling asleep, and then doing it over the next day, and doing that over and over and over again until you're dead, until you're fat, until you're 50 pounds overweight, until you hate your life, until you're miserable, until you're numb, until you can barely feel your own body anymore. You're stuck in your logical mind, and this is what your life becomes. Are you going to be lazy with your life, or are you going to be proactive? Are you going to treat it like the miracle that it is? Or are you going to numb that out of your mind by watching TV? Or browsing online endlessly through social media? I think a lot of people simply don't take life seriously. And I don't mean seriously in the sense that, like, a lot of people will go and be serious about becoming a lawyer or a doctor, or they'll be serious about starting a business and earn lots of money. I don't mean that. That to me, that's still not serious. I mean, there are many people who are so unserious they just work at Starbucks and watch Netflix. Then there's a little bit more serious people who actually start businesses and become doctors and lawyers. And then there's the really serious people. The really serious people are the ones who are metaphysically serious. That means they're actually serious about questioning consciousness itself and how you got here and what you're doing here and actually trying to figure out life. These are the philosophers. They are the really serious ones. Now, of course, there's a lot of bullshit philosophers as well. But when you do philosophy right, when you really deeply contemplate and question reality, it's not a mental masturbation exercise the way that some people think. It produces genuine results. So when I started doing philosophy when I was about 16 or 17 years old, many people around me, like when I told them that I enjoy philosophy, they would say, "Oh, philosophy, that's some airy-fairy bullshit. That's not practical. That's not useful." My parents would tell me that. They would make fun of me. Various friends and sort of colleagues that I had would also treat philosophy in this very dismissive way. It's like, "Oh, philosophy is just some ancient Greek shit that they did thousands of years ago. That doesn't work anymore. There's no point to it. It's just like an intellectual exercise, right?" No. In 20 years, I used philosophy to completely unravel the entire mystery of the universe, and I've completely figured it out. Now, of course, I still have more to do. I'm not going to be so arrogant as to say that my work is done. There's still a ton of work ahead of me, but I've reached the point where, like, literally, it sounds arrogant to say, but I've reached the point where I've completely figured out the universe. That's possible. I mean, and all that it required was a utterly radically open mind and enough curiosity and passion and the desire to do it. Like, to me, that was the point of life. There was no other point in life other than figuring it out. Everything else was a fun distraction, nice little sideshow. Of course, I did all that stuff. The sex, the money, the business. Oh yeah, I did that, and I'm still doing that to some degree, and it's fun and all that. But this is all a sideshow. I was serious about life very early on, and I would suggest as my final advice to you is get serious about life. Get metaphysically serious about life. Figure out what life is. Figure out why you're here. Figure out what it's all about. These are not aimless questions that have no answers. And this is not just purely subjective speculation where it's like, "Oh yeah, well, Leo says life is about love, but somebody else says life is about this, and somebody else thinks it's about that, and some Christian person says it's this." No. You can actually get to the absolute truth of the matter. You can get to the bottom of what life is about. And I hope one day you do. All right, that's it for me here. I hope you like this life advice. I try to make it practical, but also profound. Of course, we've only scratched the surface. I might have to do a part 2 here. We've covered a lot. We've built a nice little foundation. There's still so much advice that I could give to you, but I have to cut it off at some point. We're already past 2 hours. Just guys, as a final warning, I'll just tell you, the biggest obstacle for you doing this is going to be your culture and the beliefs and ideologies that it's programmed you with. You're going to have to do some very, very deep inner introspection to deconstruct all of that, to free your mind, to jailbreak your mind. And you're going to have to overcome not just your culture's programming, but your own internal self-deceptions. See my 3-part series about self-deception mechanisms. You have to overcome all of your own personal self-deceptions in order to fully actualize what I'm saying here. But then again, that's why I'm here. That's why my work is here, is to help you to do that. All right, so that's the end. Please click the like button for me. Come check out Actualized.org. That's my website. You can find the Life Purpose course, which will help you to find your life purpose. It's over 25 hours explaining how I found my life purpose and how you can find yours. That will address a really big pillar of this foundation, which is getting that passion into place, specifically around your career and mastery. So that's the Life Purpose course. It's all, by the way, it's exclusive content. So the stuff that you find in the Life Purpose course is completely original, completely brand new stuff that I haven't talked about on my channel or anywhere else, right? So it's worth the price of admission. Check out my book list. The book list, by the way, is also another great resource that gives you hundreds of some of the highest quality resources that I've used to figure out how to do this stuff, how to answer these questions. I had these questions, these top burning questions in my mind that I mentioned of like, you know, what is life, how to live the good life, and what is conscience. I've had these top questions. And so I found hundreds of books and I read hundreds of books that gave me good clues as to where to look. Now, of course, I didn't just read these books and believe what they said. I read the books and then I verified everything there for myself. And that's what I recommend you do, is that you verify all this stuff for yourself. Test it, see if it's true. So check out the book list, check out my blog. I post exclusive videos and content on the blog. And if you'd like, you could support me on Patreon by going to patreon.com/actualized, where you can chip in $5 a month or something like that. And that supports me and gives me a little bit more funding to do more of my, to basically expand my work in the future, which I will probably be doing. And I appreciate those donations. That's it. Now, some final concluding thought. It's just so complex and massive. Life is so massive that one of the challenges with explaining how life really works is that our culture these days is so shallow. Everything is broken down into 5-second sound bites or 5-minute segments between commercials and stuff like that, that it's rare in our culture to find deep content that actually is metaphysically serious. You see, our culture is not metaphysically serious. Our news is not. Our entertainment is not. Our schools are not. Our TV programs are not. It's almost the opposite of that. It's like it's almost like they're deliberately metaphysically flimsy. It's like they deliberately avoid acknowledging the fact that we exist. It's not existential. Nothing in our culture is existential. It's all a distraction from that. It's all surface level stuff. So one of the things that originally excited me about starting this channel, Actualized.org, and creating this deep catalog of video content, the thing that inspired me to do this was that I saw the potential, I had a vision of the potential that this catalog of content has for going and taking people deep. I wanted Actualized.org to be something different, something unique that you couldn't find almost anywhere in society. metaphysically serious self-improvement advice. It's practical, but it's also profound. It really gets you to the kernel of reality, to the kernel of your operating system. A lot of self-help advice is frivolous stuff: how to earn a little bit of money, how to have better sex, how to be nicer to your husband, how to raise good kids, how to do. I give some of this advice, and it's nice, but it's never enough. That kind of advice is never going to be enough. It's not going to fundamentally change anything about your life. It's not going to answer the deep question of why are you here, what's really going on, and how to live the good life. For that, you need an understanding at the kernel level, which is why we spend a lot of time covering foundational topics which seem like they're irrelevant or impractical, stuff about epistemology and metaphysics and spirituality and so forth. Sometimes it seems like it's all not really relevant to your life, but I promise you it is. It's just a question of how deep you want to go. The deeper, or the rather, I guess the way to say it is the taller you want to build your skyscraper, the deeper you have to dig the foundation. And if you want the tallest skyscraper, you need the deepest foundation. So that's what we're doing here. I recommend you stick around, keep watching, and take this material seriously. Take it as though you've discovered the Holy Grail here. Not because I'm the best or something, but just because truly, honestly, where else are you going to find a resource of content, a catalog of content that breaks down life at the level that I break it down at? You're not going to find this almost anywhere else, both in terms of its depth, but also breadth. I try to do both. You see, a lot of teachers, they'll either take you wide, but they won't take you deep, or they'll take you deep, but very, very narrow. And here we try to do both. It's hard to do. It's like trying to swallow an elephant all at once. It's so big. It's so epic. Like all I can say in conclusion is that it's so worth it. This work is so worth it. Understanding reality, truly understanding reality, not as an ideology, not as a belief system, not as some cultural artifact, but to really independently investigate and understand reality for what it is and how it works. It's so fucking incredible. It's so ingenious. It's so beautiful. You won't regret it. It's going to be a lot more work than you ever thought, but the payoff is going to be infinite.